So let's dive into the turbulent economic waters of India between 2020 and 2025. You see, India's economy entered the year 2020 with some pre-existing vulnerabilities. Growth had already decelerated for several quarters, and those underlying structural issues were becoming more apparent. Investment rates had been subdued for quite a while, and there was this sense of unease about the medium-term growth trajectory. The financial sector, particularly non-banking financial companies, also showed signs of stress. This backdrop was crucial as the country faced an unprecedented global shock. Many hoped for a cyclical upturn, but deeper problems remained unaddressed, complicating future policy responses. And then, the COVID-19 pandemic hit in early 2020. It was a shock of enormous proportions. The nationwide lockdown, implemented in March 2020, brought economic activity to a virtual standstill. The human cost was immense, and the economic impact was immediate and severe. Gross domestic product contracted sharply, especially in the first quarter of fiscal year 2020 to 2021. Millions lost their livelihoods, particularly in the informal sector. Supply chains were broken, and demand collapsed across many industries. The scale of this disruption was unlike anything seen in modern Indian history, testing the resilience of all sectors. The government and the Reserve Bank of India responded with various measures. Monetary policy became highly accommodative. The RBI cut interest rates significantly and injected substantial liquidity into the financial system. Fiscal policy responses included relief packages aimed at supporting vulnerable households and businesses. The efficacy and scale of these measures became subjects of considerable debate. Initial signs of recovery emerged as lockdowns eased. However, this recovery was often uneven and faced setbacks from subsequent waves of the pandemic, creating a volatile economic environment for an extended period. The journey from 2020 to mid-2025 was not just about COVID-19. The economy also had to contend with other significant headwinds. Geopolitical events, notably the war in Ukraine starting in 2022, led to global supply chain disruptions. Commodity prices, especially for oil and fertilizers, surged, fueling inflationary pressures worldwide, and India was no exception. Managing inflation while supporting growth became a key policy challenge. Despite these multiple shocks, the narrative of India's economic resilience gained traction, though a closer look reveals a complex picture of partial recoveries and persistent challenges across different sectors. All right, let's talk about agriculture's steady march amidst crises. Agriculture has always been the backbone of the Indian economy. It provides livelihoods to a large share of the population and ensures food security for the nation. Historically, agriculture has often acted as a cushion during economic downturns because its performance is often less correlated with global cycles compared to industry or services. Its importance was particularly highlighted during the recent period of widespread disruption. The sector's ability to maintain momentum was critical for overall economic stability and rural incomes during the most challenging phases of the pandemic. During the turbulent period of 2020 to 2025, the agricultural sector displayed remarkable steadiness. It consistently registered positive growth rates. For instance, in FY21, when overall GDP contracted sharply, agriculture grew by around 3.3%. This trend continued in subsequent years, with growth averaging around 3 to 4% annually. Favorable monsoons in several of these years played a significant role. Government support, through schemes like PM Kisan providing direct income support and continued procurement at minimum support prices, also contributed to this stability, preventing a deeper rural crisis. The contribution of agriculture and allied activities to India's gross value added saw a notable, albeit temporary, increase. Its share rose from around 17 to 18% pre-pandemic to nearly 20% in FY21. This was partly due to the contraction in other sectors like industry and services. However, it underscored agriculture's vital role in sustaining the economy. Even as other sectors recovered, agriculture continued its steady, if unspectacular, growth. This consistency provided a crucial demand floor for the rural economy, supporting consumption in challenging times. India achieved record food grain production in several years during this 5-year span. Production of rice, wheat and pulses reached new highs, helping maintain adequate buffer stocks and meet domestic demand. There were also concerted efforts towards agricultural diversification. Horticulture, dairy and fisheries saw continued growth, contributing to better farm incomes and nutritional security. However, this positive picture was not without its underlying issues. Many long-standing challenges in the agricultural sector persisted, and in some cases even intensified during this period, demanding urgent attention from policymakers for sustainable long-term growth. Now, let's look beyond the bountiful harvests and explore the challenges on the farm. Despite its resilient performance, Indian agriculture faced escalating challenges, particularly from climate change. The period between 2020 and 2025 witnessed increased instances of erratic weather patterns. Some regions experienced deficient rainfall and drought-like conditions, while others suffered from unseasonal heavy rains and floods. These extreme weather events directly impacted crop yields and quality. They also increased the vulnerability of farmers, especially small and marginal ones. The long-term implications of climate change for water resources and soil health remain a grave concern for the sector's sustainability. Policy challenges also marked this period significantly. The introduction of 3 farm laws in 2020 led to widespread and prolonged protests by farmers. The government eventually repealed these laws in late 2021. This episode highlighted the complexities of undertaking agricultural reforms. The debate over the minimum support price system continued, as farmers demanded legal guarantees for MSP. Issues related to market access, the role of agricultural produce market committees, and the need for better price discovery mechanisms for farmers remained contentious and largely unresolved, hindering true market-led growth. Rising input costs posed another significant burden on farmers. Prices of essential inputs like fertilizers, seeds, and diesel saw sharp increases. Global supply chain disruptions and geopolitical factors contributed to this rise, particularly for imported fertilizers like DAP and MOP. While the government provided subsidies, these often did not fully offset the cost escalation. This squeezed farm profitability and added to farmer distress. The persistent issue of farmer indebtedness continued to be a major concern, with many farmers struggling to access formal credit and falling prey to informal lenders. Structural weaknesses within the agricultural sector also persisted. Small and fragmented landholdings limit the scope for mechanization and economies of scale. Access to modern agricultural practices and technology remains uneven. Inadequate rural infrastructure, including cold storage facilities and efficient supply chains, leads to significant post-harvest losses. These losses are estimated to be substantial, reducing the actual income realized by farmers from their produce. Addressing these deep-rooted structural issues is critical for enhancing productivity, improving farmer incomes, and ensuring the long-term viability of Indian agriculture. Finally, let's explore industry's volatile path to recovery. India's industrial sector was already grappling with a slowdown before the pandemic struck. Growth in manufacturing had been weak for several quarters. Issues such as low capacity utilization, stressed corporate balance sheets, and subdued private investment plagued the sector. There was an urgent need for a revival to create jobs and drive broader economic growth. The index of industrial production often showed lackluster performance. This pre-existing condition made the sector particularly vulnerable to the massive shock that was about to unfold in early 2020, setting the stage for a difficult period. The COVID-19 pandemic delivered a severe blow to the industrial sector. The nationwide lockdown in 2020 brought factories to a halt. It disrupted supply chains, both domestic and international. A significant challenge was the availability of labor, as many migrant workers returned to their villages. Consequently, industrial output contracted sharply in FY21, with manufacturing bearing the brunt of the decline. Specific industries like automobiles, textiles, and capital goods faced unprecedented drops in production and sales. The recovery, when it began, was often tentative and uneven across different industrial segments. In response to the industrial slowdown and to promote domestic manufacturing, the government launched several initiatives. The Make in India campaign continued to be a focal point. More significantly, production-linked incentive schemes were introduced for various sectors. These schemes aimed to attract investment, enhance domestic production capabilities, and reduce import dependence. Sectors covered included electronics, pharmaceuticals, automobiles, and textiles. The early impact of these PLI schemes began to be assessed towards the later part of this 5-year period, with mixed initial results and ongoing debates about their long-term efficacy and design. Recovery trends in the industrial sector, as reflected in IIP data, showed considerable volatility between 2021 and 2025. There were periods of strong rebound, often driven by a low base effect and pent-up demand. However, growth frequently moderated due to various factors, including renewed COVID waves, global supply chain bottlenecks like semiconductor shortages, and rising input costs. While core manufacturing sectors showed signs of improvement, some segments continued to struggle. Import dependence for critical components and raw materials remained a persistent issue, highlighting the long road ahead for achieving true self-reliance in manufacturing. Section 5. Building blocks and raw materials, construction and mining in flux. The construction sector plays a vital role in the Indian economy. It is a major source of employment, particularly for unskilled and semi-skilled labor. It has strong backward and forward linkages with other sectors, such as cement, steel, and real estate. The health of the construction industry is often seen as a barometer for overall economic activity. Before 2020, the sector, especially real estate, had faced its own set of challenges, including liquidity issues and unsold inventory. The government's push for infrastructure development was seen as a key driver for its future growth. The performance of the construction sector during the 2020 to 2025 period was marked by sharp swings. The initial lockdowns in 2020 brought construction activities to a near-complete halt. This led to a severe contraction in the sector's output. However, as restrictions eased, activity gradually resumed. The government's increased focus on infrastructure projects, under initiatives like the National Infrastructure Pipeline, provided significant impetus. Public spending on roads, railways, and urban infrastructure helped drive recovery. However, private sector participation in real estate remained somewhat cautious initially, though it picked up later. The mining sector, which supplies essential raw materials like coal, iron ore, and other minerals, also experienced fluctuations. Coal production remained critical for India's energy security, given the dominance of thermal power. Efforts were made to increase domestic coal output to reduce import dependence. However, the mining sector faced several challenges. These included regulatory hurdles, environmental concerns, and issues related to land acquisition. The auctioning of mineral blocks aimed to bring in more private investment and transparency, but progress was sometimes slower than anticipated. Global commodity price volatility also impacted the sector's profitability. Overall, both construction and mining witnessed periods of growth and contraction during these 5 years. The construction sector's GVA growth, after a steep fall in fiscal year 21, showed a strong rebound in fiscal year 22 and then moderated to more sustainable levels. Mining sector growth was also variable, influenced by domestic demand, global prices, and policy changes. The government's continued push for infrastructure development is expected to support demand for both construction services and raw materials. However, ensuring timely project execution and addressing structural constraints remain key for sustained growth in these vital areas of the secondary sector. Section 6. The service engine resilience and strain in India's largest sector. The services sector has long been the dominant engine of India's economic growth. It contributes the largest share to the country's gross value added and employment. Its diverse components range from high-skill IT services to contact-intensive trade, hotels, transport, and personal services. Before 2020, the services sector was a picture of robust health, consistently outperforming agriculture and industry. This strength was expected to provide a buffer against economic shocks. However, the unique nature of the COVID-19 pandemic posed unprecedented challenges, particularly for specific segments within this vast and varied sector. The impact of COVID-19 was particularly severe on contact-intensive services. Segments like travel, tourism, hospitality, and retail trade were devastated by lockdowns, travel restrictions, and social distancing norms. Restaurants, hotels, and airlines faced near-zero revenues for extended periods. This led to widespread job losses and business closures, especially among smaller enterprises. The recovery in these subsectors was slow and painful. It was often dependent on the trajectory of the pandemic and an easing of restrictions. The human cost in these segments was substantial, affecting millions of livelihoods directly. As the pandemic wave subsided and vaccination coverage improved, there was a gradual recovery in these hard-hit service areas. Phenomena like revenge travel and increased consumer spending on experiences provided some temporary boosts. Businesses adapted through innovation. For instance, restaurants shifted to online delivery models. Retailers enhanced their e-commerce presence. However, the recovery remained uneven. Some segments, like air travel, rebounded more quickly once restrictions were lifted, while others, like international tourism, took longer to show significant improvement. The path to pre-pandemic levels of activity was arduous for many. Overall, the services sector's growth trajectory from 2020 to 2025 reflected this dichotomy. While some parts struggled, others, like financial services, insurance, and real estate, showed greater resilience. Public administration and defense services also provided a cushion due to continued government spending. The overall services gross value added contracted in fiscal year 21, though less severely than industry. It then rebounded strongly in fiscal year 22. Subsequent growth moderated but remained a key driver of India's aggregate economic performance. However, the quality of this recovery and the health of smaller service enterprises remained areas of concern for policymakers. Section 7. Digital Dawn. The unstoppable ascent of IT and business services. Amidst the widespread economic disruption caused by the pandemic, India's information technology and IT-enabled services sector emerged as a star performer. This segment not only weathered the storm but actually thrived. It demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability. Even before 2020, Indian IT services were globally competitive. The pandemic acted as a catalyst, accelerating trends that played to the sector's strengths. Its ability to maintain business continuity and meet surging global demand was a testament to its robust infrastructure and skilled workforce. A key factor in the IT sector's success was the rapid adoption of the work-from-home model. Indian IT companies transitioned millions of employees to remote work almost overnight. This ensured uninterrupted service delivery to global clients. Simultaneously, the pandemic fueled a massive global demand for digital transformation services. Businesses worldwide sought to enhance their online presence, adopt cloud computing, strengthen cybersecurity, and leverage data analytics. Indian IT firms were well positioned to capture this increased demand, leading to strong growth in exports and revenues throughout this period. The digital wave also spurred significant activity in India's domestic startup ecosystem. Fintech, edtech, health tech, and e-commerce platforms saw unprecedented growth. Investment poured into these ventures, leading to a boom in the number of unicorn startups valued at over $1 billion. While there was a subsequent correction and greater scrutiny on valuations and business models from 2023 onwards, the underlying trend of digitalization continued unabated. This digital transformation extended beyond startups, with traditional businesses also increasingly adopting digital tools and processes to enhance efficiency and reach. The contribution of IT and business services to India's exports, employment, and overall economic narrative became even more pronounced between 2020 and 2025. The sector was a major foreign exchange earner and created a significant number of high-quality jobs. However, this rapid growth also brought challenges. A talent crunch emerged, with companies competing fiercely for skilled professionals. There were also concerns about the potential impact of a global economic slowdown on future demand for IT services. Maintaining this growth momentum required continuous innovation and upskilling of the workforce. Section 8. Decoding the economy. Shifting sands of sectoral GVA shares. Gross value added provides a crucial measure of economic activity. It reflects the value of goods and services produced in an economy, minus the cost of inputs and raw materials used. Analyzing GVA by sector helps us understand the contribution of different parts of the economy, agriculture, industry, and services to overall output. The period from 2020 to 2025 witnessed some interesting, though perhaps temporary, shifts in these sectoral shares. These shifts were largely driven by the differential impact of the pandemic and the subsequent recovery patterns across the primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. The primary sector, dominated by agriculture and allied activities, saw its share in GVA increase during the initial phase of the pandemic. In fiscal year 21, when stringent lockdowns severely impacted industry and services, agriculture continued to grow. As a result, its share in total GVA rose from around 18.3% in fiscal year 20 to approximately 20.2% in fiscal year 21, according to provisional estimates. This highlighted agriculture's role as a shock absorber. In subsequent years, fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 25 estimates, as other sectors recovered, agriculture's share moderated slightly but remained robust, hovering around 18 to 19%, underscoring its continued significance. The secondary sector, comprising industry manufacturing, construction, mining, electricity, gas, and water supply, experienced significant volatility. Its share in GVA, which was around 25.9% in fiscal year 20, dipped during the peak pandemic impact in fiscal year 21 due to widespread disruptions. It then recovered as industrial activity resumed and government initiatives like the production-linked incentive schemes began to take effect. By fiscal year 24 and early estimates for fiscal year 25, the secondary sector's share had largely stabilized around the 25 to 26% mark. The performance of manufacturing remained key to the overall trajectory of this sector's contribution to the national economy. The tertiary sector, or services, continued to be the largest contributor to India's GVA throughout the 2020 to 2025 period. Its share was approximately 55.8% in fiscal year 20. Despite the severe impact of the pandemic on contact-intensive services, the sector's overall share saw only a marginal dip in fiscal year 21, cushioned by the strong performance of IT, financial services, and public administration. As the economy recovered, the services sector quickly regained its momentum. Preliminary data for fiscal year 24 and estimates for fiscal year 25 suggest its share remained comfortably above 55–56%, reaffirming its role as the primary driver of India's economic output. Section 9. The Path Ahead, Projections, Policies, and the Pursuit of Prudence. As of mid-2025, India's economic outlook presents a mixed picture of optimism and caution. Projections for GDP growth in the upcoming fiscal year 26, generally range between 6% and 7%. This suggests a continuation of the recovery momentum. However, the global economic environment remains uncertain. Geopolitical risks persist. Concerns about global inflation and potential slowdowns in major economies could impact India's trade and investment flows. Domestic factors, such as monsoon performance and private consumption trends, will also play a crucial role in shaping the actual growth outcome. Several key challenges need to be addressed to ensure sustained and inclusive growth. Managing inflation remains a priority. While headline inflation has moderated from its peaks, core inflation and food price volatility require careful monitoring and policy responses. Creating sufficient formal sector jobs, especially for the youth entering the labor force, is perhaps the most significant long-term challenge. The quality of employment also needs improvement. Maintaining fiscal consolidation while supporting growth through necessary public investment is another delicate balancing act for policymakers. Sustained policy efforts are essential to tackle deep-rooted structural issues. Reforms are needed to enhance agricultural productivity and farmer incomes. The manufacturing sector requires a continued push to improve competitiveness, integrate with global value chains, and boost private investment. Further simplification of business regulations and improvements in the ease of doing business are critical. Crucially, significant and sustained investment in human capital, particularly in health and education, is necessary to reap the demographic dividend and prepare the workforce for future challenges. In conclusion, India's economic journey over the past 5 years has been one of navigating unprecedented shocks and demonstrating resilience, albeit unevenly. The path ahead requires careful policy choices and a commitment to prudent economic management. The goal should not just be high growth, but growth that is inclusive, sustainable, and creates opportunities for all sections of society. Balancing the imperatives of growth with macroeconomic stability will be paramount. The task of building a more robust and equitable Indian economy is an ongoing one, demanding continuous effort and adaptation from all stakeholders.